Okay, hey everyone, how's it going? Hopefully you didn't eat too big of a lunch. They always stick me after lunch, so normally I make people like stand up and shout and wave their hands around, but I'm even going to skip it right now. Thank you for coming to the session. It's about progressive web apps, hopefully for all Drupal sites. It's a little bit of a lie, but we're working on it. This stuff is pretty timely, so if you go back and look at the slides later, I kind of put a read before date on there. Anyway, I'll be doing like a brief overview of progressive web app in general. It's just a web technology. We're going to talk about how it can work on a Drupal site, how you can do it in Drupal, what you can't do in Drupal yet, and what the future may hold. So anything that's blue on the slides is a link. When you go look at them, I'll like tweet out a link later to the slides. They're on GitHub pages. The concept of a progressive web app came from a Chrome product manager named Alex Russell at Google, and his wife coined this term. She worked for the BBC and did a lot of work related to making web apps far more accessible in the accessibility sense of the word. However, they kind of worked together with their two areas of expertise and came up a couple years ago with a list of things that can help a website seamlessly enhance itself into being what feels like a native app. A lot of the web in the last 10 years has been built around the idea of progressive enhancement. You start with something simple, you have markup, you have content, you enhance it with CSS, you enhance it with JavaScript to provide style and behavior. And the idea of a progressive web app is that you can slowly and incrementally add functionality to an existing website that when a device is able to support will enhance the experience while never taking anything away from the base website that you already are familiar with. So, what are the properties of a progressive web app? Nowadays, it's almost mandatory to have a responsive website. The site needs to fill the form factor of the device or even the mode of the device that is displaying the information. Mobile phone, screen, touch screen, desktop, maybe a laptop with touch, a refrigerator screen, an Apple Watch, whatever those things were, the Google glasses that people were wearing. All these things you can support all those devices with a responsive website. Easy. Nobody questions this nowadays. The second thing that a website needs to feel like an app is resilience to the network. Alex Russell, this guy that I mentioned before, did most of his coding days at Google were spent on the Gmail team. And if anyone's used Gmail when there's a flaky network connection, it actually behaves quite well. And a lot of his experiences and opinions came from developing Gmail and making it robust in the absence or even presence of a flaky network or the absence of a network at all. I'm sure most people have tried to use Gmail and you compose a message and then it says, hey, the network's not there, but we're just going to send it when you get a network connection again, no worries. It's not an error, it's just a helpful message that says we're deferring this action until we can handle it. So, websites typically aren't working well with a flaky connection, especially when people are loading third-party resources like social widgets or loading their bootstrap from a CDN or something like that. Any one network error can result in a total failure to render a web page for up to 30 seconds or something. To function as an app, like a native app on the phone, there needs to be some sort of network resilience. It should feel native. This is kind of up for discussion sometimes, but sometimes if you want to make it feel native, and you're most familiar with one particular OS, then you will make it feel like that OS. And it's best if it feels native across a lot of devices. This means using native form elements sometimes and that kind of thing. This is probably the most subjective point when you're trying to come up with something. Instant install. So normally an app store has to go and you fetch something from a store. You have to go to the app store, find it in the app store, hit the download button, perhaps pay for it. But the cost of doing all that action is amortized in the future because you never have to wait for that to happen again. It's on your phone and it's just there. So instant install kind of leapfrogs this app store thing and does you one better because you get the instant feedback of having a website, but then the future costs are also instant. So the website needs to be discoverable also. That's like the where you're searching in an app store and you're basically searching and you're looking for something. We need to be able to share progressive web apps with links. Safely delivered is also another thing. This comes up only when you're looking at the service worker spec or new web standards. A lot of them only work with HTTPS. I'm personally picking the term safely delivered instead of safe in general because your server could get hacked and it's not ever guaranteed that it's safe. But the connection between the server and the client has to be safe, and that's HTTPS. And that's really important because you'll see on another slide here the way that you can think of a service worker can almost be something malicious. There are some other ones. Go, if you're interested, read the full full rationale that they provided for this term, progressive web app. The general idea being that we take concepts that are already pretty common in websites and make sure that we can progressively add new functionality to make them feel more native on every platform. I'm not even going to get into the business side of this stuff because this is dev days, so I get to skip it. The main ingredients of a progressive web app are really only two things. Well, ingredient 0 is HTTPS, as I said. So that is a technical barrier that has to be overcome first. Then, service worker. So this is a new web spec that allows you to control network interaction and manage offline functionality. Then the second part is this MANIFEST.JSON, which is quite simple and is just helping you control or help with search, branding, and discoverability. So let's talk about the service worker briefly. It's a separate JavaScript thread, like a web worker, but it has event listeners for things that normal web workers don't have. You can listen for network events when the browser is asking the network for stuff, and it also has an app lifecycle, so it can install itself, activate itself, update itself, be replaced, and then finally be deleted. A service worker is very literally a friendly man-in-the-middle attack that lets you do very useful things, which is why it requires HTTPS. Otherwise, on a non-secure connection, someone could just sit at the edge of a backbone and install their own service worker on every insecure website in the world and basically control most of the internet or the web. The point is the service worker allows you to customize network functionality before you're hitting your actual server-side server. It's really like a tiny little proxy server that you're using to enhance the client. And it can bounce stuff back, it can pass things through, and it can do all sorts of stuff. Very useful. The MANIFEST.JSON is a like I said, a very tiny file with some simple metadata that replaces all these meta tags and icon tags and that sort of stuff. But it's centralized, and now it's standardized, and it works across browsers. It helps you provide some branding, and it allows you to like install a web app. So instead of having the offline screen of various browsers, once you have a minimal service worker plus a manifest file, you can have a loading screen. If you add the website to your home screen, and then click on it again later on, they get a loading screen just like any app, any native app on the phone. This one's just the default contrib module. It does, Drupal colors and the DrupalCon. So progressive web apps in Drupal. Drupal just makes URL-based web pages. It's totally in line to take care of all this. You don't need to be using React or Vue or all these other buzzwords. The progressive web app can be enhancing a static site. It can be enhancing Jekyll or Drupal or WordPress or Django, whatever. And there's a module for that. The PWA Drupal module, it's /PWA, is opinionated and tries to provide drop-in support for simple websites that just want to add installability and some caching functions. So you can turn a D7 website into a PWA today. You just have to install it, add some config, and then you're good to go. Very near a 1.0 release. I released another beta this morning. The module can pre-cache preferred paths. By default, it just does root and an offline page. And then if you go to any other URL when you don't have network, it'll tell you you're offline. It can go offline after one Drupal cache clear, which is cool. It provides this branding file and makes it installable. And you can configure almost everything except for the icons within an admin UI. Very importantly, it uninstalls the service worker after the module disappears. Like I mentioned, the service worker could kind of be considered a man-in-the-middle attack. And there are many reasons why any website could have like one of these zombie service workers, as they call them. You might sell the domain. You might relaunch on a new CMS or something like that. If the old service worker is still there, then it will interfere with the new website. And if you don't have a new service worker telling that old one to uninstall itself, it stays there kind of forever, depending on the platform. But in Firefox and Chrome, it stays forever right now. Mac OS, iOS deletes it after a few weeks. So the problem isn't as bad. But like I said, any website could have this zombie worker problem. A plugin-based CMS is especially prone to it because you can just go uncheck a box and the code supporting this service worker disappears. And then it's doing bad things to your website that you definitely don't want. There's no way to provide an uninstall module or something like that, because if you uninstall that module in the future and then someone comes back, say you sunset the module for a year and then someone comes back a year and a month later, they still are going to have this zombie worker on their browser internals. So that problem's kind of solved. It does a phone home check. It's worth saying because a lot of people, when we had this thing in an unreleased state, people were coming in and being like, man, you broke my website. I was like, well, yeah, there's no release for this thing, but sorry. Problem solved. It's safe to install and try out now, and you can safely remove it. Some of the other things that native apps do that provide a lot of engagement are push notifications and content updates in the background and so forth. The module can't do that kind of thing now. It's a basic module, so it does not handle push notifications or background sync. It also doesn't let you choose how you're caching the assets. It has one strategy, stale while revalidate, and it basically, once you get something from the network, it caches it. When you look at it the next time, it shows you the copy from the cache very quickly without hitting the network, and then goes to the network and updates it in the background. So you're always like one version behind at most. No problem. These things are very dependent on the app or the site being built. So we kind of thought, we're not going to provide one opinionated implementation, and we're just going to maybe get to these with some sort of API later on. But in the meantime, just do nothing. If people need that kind of functionality, they'll probably write their own service worker. If you're thinking to yourself, man, I can do all this on my own already, this module probably isn't for you. It's just for people. There's, however many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of D7 sites out there right now. And so now all of them can get basic progressive web app functionality, even if the last time that they were meaningfully developed was 2012 or whatever. Now they can have 2018 tech. It's kind of cool, I think. So there's like a missing Drupal API that kind of needs to go along with this. However, we started talking about how to make this happen. There's an issue in a different module. It's Drupal.org/project/service worker, no dashes or underscores or anything. There's an API roadmap. People started talking about it in DrupalCon Mumbai a couple years ago. At the time, they decided we don't know how to do this. But, things have come along now, and I got interested in trying to see if we could make something happen. So I'm kind of picking up the ropes and trying to spearhead it. There are front-end community tools for this type of thing that let you kind of declaratively define a service worker now. And Drupal can use this simple declaration pattern to kind of, you can provide a hook that lets you make the declarations, and then you've got a service worker. And maybe 4 or 5 modules that need specific pieces of offline functionality can combine into one and then compile into one service worker that's controlled centrally within Drupal, as opposed to 4 or 5 modules attempting to run different service workers on different routes within the website underneath. There's a bunch of reasons why that's far more complex and kind of a drag to maintain. Oh, that's it. Okay, so basically I've been working on this module while I was here. There's a new release. The service worker API is like just now I'm going to start working on it, so if anyone has any ideas or if you have pain points that you've already experienced while working with Drupal, that would be cool. There's a D8 version of the PWA module that's not nearly as far along. So if you have D8 skills, which mine aren't that great, I'm mostly a front-end developer with experience with front-end technology like service worker, so I used my dusty, stale D7 skills to get something out the door. And then in D8, it's coming along, but not quite there yet. Additionally, if you've implemented a service worker on any website, or especially like a Drupal 8 one with a bunch of modules kind of in play, I'd love to hear what's going on. But yeah, that was short and sweet, and I guess I will open it up for questions if people have any. I'll just repeat them. You can kind of shout at me. Come on. No one's even going to ask about Lighthouse? I even left that out of the presentation so someone could ask. No. Okay. Well, I'll answer my own question then. There's a progressive web app audit tool inside Chrome DevTools, and you can run it in the command line as well. And it helps you keep track of all the pieces that someone needs in order to see how the progressive web app is performing. This one's probably not going to be so great, but I'm going to run it and we'll see what happens. It just does a bunch of stuff behind the scenes with Chrome. It runs a couple tests, sees how the website functions with no network, and sees if it's got the manifest file and all that stuff. This site is going to get a horrendous score because it's a slide deck. So you can see there it's loading it without styles and all that. Okay, so red 36, you know, too bad. When I go to, oh, whoops, yeah, see if my Wi-Fi works. If not, it's no big deal. I've got a local copy. All right, fine. Oh yeah, I need to do this in an incognito. So now I'm going to do the same thing here on a D7 site that's got the module. And you let it run its little tests. Oh, whoa, ouch. Oh, you know why? Because I was actually testing. Haha, that's funny. Does anybody care if I do some live coding here? Yeah. And then, let's see, template.php had the, so I was testing the alter hook from a theme. There we go. So you can provide, the one thing that this module can't do without code is provide the manifest icons. So you just have to write an alter hook and kind of slide them in. It's not a big deal, but kind of my drive to get 100% drop-in without any code is stopped at the moment. If anyone wants to make a quick admin UI to upload files, kind of unmanaged files or something like that, then it would help me out. Boom, there we go. It doesn't redirect HTTP to HTTPS. If I had a module to do that, it would also get 100. So when you install this module, you can basically, as long as you're doing a couple other things like serving your own HTTPS, serving or redirecting traffic on your own, which maybe your CDN does that, then you get 100 on Lighthouse automatically, which I think is pretty cool. And then if I go in here and shut it down and refresh, the images go away, but all the content stays. And then when I click, some link that I never visited before, it says you're offline. So it's kind of a cool thing. A lot of times when people try to visit your website and there's something wrong with their phone, the phone tells a person hey, you've done something wrong. You don't have an internet connection. This is your problem. The basic thing here, the default message says you're offline, but it can also say something nicer hey, it seems like we can't connect to the server right now. Or when the network connection comes back, we'll show you the URL that you requested. However, in the meantime, these 4 static pages are available for viewing. So a business thing, the one business thing that I would show to a manager to get them to like this is that it's a branding opportunity even when the network isn't available. Cool. Does anybody have a question now, or am I just left out to dry here? Yo, what's up? Uh-huh. He's okay. What can I clarify? Yes. Let me repeat or summarize the questions. Number one was, can I explain the manifest in a little bit more detail? Sure thing. The second question was, is there an online and an offline version, or are you caching? And the answer is, you're caching it beforehand with the network. In order for this to work, you must have the network the first time. And then you cache everything that you need for later. And when the network isn't there, then you've pre-cached a URL that says you're offline, basically. It's a little bit, it of course gets more complicated based on your needs, but for a Drupal site, like I said, like a URL-based content site, you can kind of safely cache URLs that you see or offer someone a button to cache them, and then go from there. The manifest file is on the right column here. It's a little bit small on the screen, but there's two identity things, the name and the short name. This short name is what shows up underneath the icon on whatever OS you're using, Android or iOS. The name is what appears in that screenshot that I showed with the splash, the blue DrupalCon thing. You can see here that there's presentation data. You can specify a start URL. By default, it specifies root, like the home page, but you could have a special PWA start URL path, right? And you define that and say, when someone loads my progressive web app, they should go to this unique page, right? Maybe it doesn't have as much personalization and it's easier to cache or whatever, right? But the start URL is configurable, and when the site has kind of like deactivated on the phone, and then you click that button on the home screen for the first time in a while, that's when it controls where you're heading. If you just leave the tab open in your web browser and come back to it, then it loads whatever URL you had. The theme colors control the browser Chrome. That's different from the Google Chrome browser, but the pieces of the web browser that aren't the web page. You know, the address bar and the buttons and stuff on the top and the bottom. So these two colors can provide branding to the whole screen. Your browser can look the same color as your website, which is cool. You can define a default orientation, like maybe you've got an app that is better in landscape, but you know, most people read websites, portraits, so we went with that as a default. The display is 4 settings that control how much. There's like a slider that controls how much it looks like a web browser and how much it looks like a full screen native app. Standalone is like number 2 of 4. And there's one that's just browser. Browser, minimal UI, standalone, full screen. Then, like I said, you provide these icons. They just have to live on your file system somewhere, and the module provides every size needed in order to get this the Lighthouse score to be 100. Because that's kind of the canonical way to check and see if a progressive web app is working correctly at the moment. Did that answer your concerns? Okay, cool. Any other questions or comments, or like, I'm super boring? I'm kind of like leaning in that direction right now. No? Okay, cool. Well, I'll be around the rest of the day and stuff, and just stop me in the hall if you want to talk about this. Thanks for listening.